and welcome to this episode of Case by Case, Five Stones and Goliath. Today I'm honored to be joined by Thomas E. Smith, someone with a direct connection to the land, history, and identity surrounding the Minnesota Mdewakanton Dakota Sioux lineal descendants. This land and this lineage carry generations of meaning, stories, and identity. And today we get to hear one of those stories firsthand. Thomas, thank you so much for being here. We're truly grateful to have your voice on the show.
It's good to be here.
To start, can you share a little bit about who you are and your personal connection to the Mdewakanton Dakota Sioux lineage?
Yeah, sure. I have, I'm a lineal descendant of the Mdewakanton Dakota Sioux Indians. And I've been involved with efforts to obtain federal recognition of all of the Mdewakanton Dakota lineal descendants that have been denied enrollment at the existing Mdewakanton communities here in Minnesota. So there, I trace back a couple of different ways, but primarily on my mother's side, and initially we were tracing back to the 1886 census that was taken to establish the three communities, but then now also further back to the 1855 census that was taken to establish the Sioux half-breed lineal descendants that were granted a reservation and recognition via the 1830 Treaty of Prairie du Chien. So, I trace back to those groups.
Amazing. Thank you for that background. I know our listeners are very intrigued by what you have to share today. So, growing up, how is your family's history and identity as Dakota descendants passed down to you?
Yeah, it's not a traditional story. I was not raised in a traditional Dakota family. We were basically a white middle class, working class family, and but my mom always recognized the fact that her ancestors, her lineage was not only from on the Dakota line, but also the Ojibwe line. So she is the primary parent that I draw lineage from. My father really, I didn't have a lot of background on his ancestry, but and really I was pretty much raised in a suburban community here in St. Paul, Minnesota. Didn't really have a lot of exposure to traditional Native customs and such. But it was in 2003 when there was a lawsuit that was filed that was intended to provide recognition to all of the lineal descendants that traced back to the 1886 census. Wow. So I got involved with that along with the rest of our family, and started becoming more and more familiar with the history and the background of the Mdewakanton Dakota people, and have since continued to do what I can to help with the pursuit of recognition for all of the lineal descendants that have not been able to enroll and have not been federally recognized.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. I think it's amazing that you hold your heritage so closely to your heart, and I think a lot of our listeners can resonate with that sentiment. But
Yeah,
that leads.
it's like I said, it's not the traditional story, although I think that, over decades, um, there are many many lineal descendants that have, grown up in the same environment
Mhm.
and not been able to fully um, experience and appreciate the lineage that exists. Um, and uh, and so I would welcome uh, you know some the federal recognition that we're seeking to kind of uh, codify and make official our existence as the tribe, the original tribe.
Yeah. That leads me to my next question which was at what point did you realize this identity was being questioned, diminished, or taken away? Is it when you started to hear about these lawsuits?
Yeah, it's been a learning process for me. Over the last 20 plus years, trying to gain an understanding of all of the history that's transpired.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I never really paid a lot of attention to my ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm, I'm 75 years old now, and um, uh, I've become to appreciate more my own mortality and the history behind me. And I would, um, I have just learned so much,
Yeah.
and
Start to compare and think
that
about.
alone has been gratifying to recognize that. Well, I came from somewhere, and
Yeah,
this is gratifying.
absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. So, what would you say has been the most difficult part of this loss of identity for you personally or for your family?
Well, I think that um, never having to be able to say, this is where I came from. This
Mm-hmm.
is my background. This is my bloodline. This is my history. Um, never really knew a whole lot, and um, that for me is uh, simply the primary goal of a lot of these efforts is to be able to say, okay, this is my history, and I can see it and I can show it, and I can live with it the rest of my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine how difficult it must be to have that heritage be diminished and sort of taken away and forgotten over time. Um, I'm curious, was there a specific moment when you realized how serious the impact of this was on your life and your community?
I've lived a very good life. Been very fortunate. Things have gone well. I have never felt deprived. Um, but once again, I've never really had an understanding of where I came from. What my background was, and my mom never really talked that much about it. I mean, she recognized the fact that there were relatives at the different communities and such, but it really wasn't a topic around the dinner table that much. And now, you know, getting into my latter years, um, I've really, I'm a little bit more. I'm definitely more interested in it, and it's not like I feel like I was that something was withheld from me, or that it negatively impacted my life that much. It's just that there's an element of fulfillment that I think I really want to obtain, you know, as I move along.
Since connecting with more of these people, how do you think it's connected? How do you think it's affected the broader Mdewakanton descendant community?
I think that um, there are thousands and thousands of individuals in my same situation. Um, it's only natural that through evolution and just time, families have drifted and evolved, and the the Dakota customs and traditions and history. Um, I think for many families and individuals has just kind of diminished and drifted away. Uh, uh, and I would hope that our efforts are definitely federal recognition would officially establish the the tribe as in existence, and uh, and I hope that many of these families and individuals would be able to kind of reconnect with that history, and there could be somewhat of a revival and a retention uh, uh, of the Mdewakanton Dakota identity. And that's an important word. I want to emphasize the importance of our identity, because that's what we feel we've been deprived of,
Absolutely.
and that federal recognition will restore that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that this issue has brought people together instead of creating silence and fear.
Well, I'm hoping so. We have, um, we're trying to reach out to as many lineal descendants as possible to, make them aware of the efforts. Um, and it really is one of the primary um, reasons and, goals of the documentary that we've been working on.
Yeah. What do you want more people to know about this community of people?
Well, I think there's a lot of history that can be very confusing um, for someone. We're talking about almost 200 years, going back to the Treaty of Prairie du Chien in 1830, and there are so many events that have taken place. Many of them that not that pleasant, um, that have splintered and caused deprivation for the previous generations, and so I think that it would be important that current generations have um, a better understanding of the history that's evolved, and a lot of the events and how they fit together, um, to explain how we got to where we're at.
Yeah, I think that would be an amazing takeaway. I know our
Mhm.
listeners will appreciate. So, do you believe there are misconceptions about this issue that you feel need to be corrected?
Well, um, I don't know if I'd necessarily call them misconceptions. I would just say that there's um, there's a lot of information that no one has been aware of unless you've studied Dakota history, and that the story I think is important to know, as we feel it should be told, and that it exists. And I don't know that. Yeah, I think there are some there's some misinformation that has emanated, over the years from some of the communities, as far as um, lineal descendancy, and what that I would say is a misconception, is this whole uh, idea of blood quantum, the concept of blood quantum, and
Could you explain that to
versus
people?
lineal descendancy.
Could
Hmm.
you explain blood quantum a little bit to people who might not know what that is or means?
Yeah, it's blood quantum is basically a calculation of percentage of blood that transfers from generation to generation. So
Mm-hmm.
essentially, if you've got two full blood individuals who have a child, that child becomes full blood.
Mm-hmm.
Is considered a full blood Dakota individual, Indian. If that child intermarries with a non-Indian, then you've got a 100% um, blood quantum and a 0% blood quantum,
Mm-hmm.
and their children would be 50%, would have a 50% blood quantum. Just a basic calculation there. Now, over the generations, um, certainly that calculation, that quantum diminishes, because there's um, a lot. Intermarriage is just occurs over generations and over decades.
Mm-hmm.
So we're at a point now where I don't know that there would be a full blood Mdewakanton Dakota Indian still in existence.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a number of generations that would have had to maintain a perfect bloodline all the way up to the present. And so essentially everybody is um, uh, has a diminished blood quantum, and the that calculation, um, in terms of fractions, gets smaller and smaller just over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's this whole blood quantum calculation. Now that has, I think, is a misconception that has been uh, uh, in existence, as opposed to lineal descendancy. And lineal descendancy it doesn't involve any calculation of blood quantum or such.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple um, relationship. It uh, um, from generation to generation, if there is Dakota blood that is passed from one generation to another, then that constitutes lineal descendancy. So for me to, the other thing is that there are so many things that can confuse that calculation. As far as marriages, divorces, adoptions, it can get extremely confusing, and but lineal descendancy is not confusing at all. If you trace to an individual that has Mdewakanton Dakota Sioux blood, then you're a lineal descendant, and that it isn't a matter of um, percentage.
Wow. Well, thank you for enlightening myself and our listeners who might not fully understand all angles of this topic. That's very
Well, you can
interesting.
see that that tree of descendancy can expand has expanded into thousands, tens of thousands of people.
Oh my goodness.
If you use lineal descendancy to trace back 200 years, you're talking about a really big tree, and it never goes away. The DNA is always there. The Dakota blood is always there.
That's amazing. So moving forward, what gives you hope right now as you look ahead, even with the challenges that your community is facing?
Well, my main interest, my main goal, with regards to the efforts that we have and the documentary that we're producing, is first of all to retain and revive the identity, our identity, and to obtain federal recognition, which essentially makes official that revives that identity. That's that's really important. Really want to be able to hang my hat on that that element,
Yeah.
and but then also um, play a little part in trying to provide information back to all of the lineal descendants, so that they can see and learn and understand more of where they came from. It's I think it's an important part of one's life to try and know what came before me.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Having that hope of restoring identity is so important in a situation like this. And I'm so glad that you have that. So, as my final question for you, if you could speak directly to people who have never heard about this issue before, what is the one thing you would want them to understand?
Well, once again, I think that there are thousands, tens of thousands of lineal descendants that have been deprived of their identity, this identity, and that uh, simply obtaining federal recognition and having the federal government um, uh, provide the support that they they need to do, for any other tribe, um, so that all of these thousands of individuals can uh, see and accept and understand where they, part of where they came from. Everybody has become more and more complicated ancestries, but this is one that I would hope that a lot of people can, uh, uh, experience and recognize and carry forward with.
Amazing takeaway, Tom. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Can you let our listeners know where they can go if they want to follow your work, learn more about what's happening with the Mdewakanton descendants, or just stay informed about this issue?
Well, just to give a little pitch, and the documentary that we are producing is entitled "The Last Winter Count," and it it goes through and lays out many of the events that have occurred over the last 180 years, from 1830 up to the present. And we um, we have a we don't have a website that I'm aware of at this point. We're working on that. In addition to producing the documentary, so I think part of the documentary will have locations that individuals can go to learn more about the history, the legal actions that are also in place and being worked on, and so I'm hoping that um, many lineal descendants that want to know more and participate more and be more informed will be able to go to that website, which I don't have right now.
And when this documentary is finished, where will people be able to find that?
I think it's probably going to end up on YouTube.
Okay, amazing.
Um, Once again, I think, we're working closely with Three Stones,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, uh, I just simply think we haven't really talked about the details of promotion and distribution,
Okay,
but we're getting close. We're getting close. So,
awesome. Thank you, Thomas.
mhm.
Um, well, everyone, that was another powerful conversation with Thomas E. Smith. We deeply appreciate you sharing your experience and helping others understand the real human story behind this case. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. And if you gained value from this episode, we would be grateful if you left a rating or review wherever you listen. Please share this conversation with anyone who wants to understand what is truly happening with the Mdewakanton Dakota Sioux lineal descendants. Take one insight from today, reflect on it, and let us know your thoughts. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Case by Case, Five Stones and Goliath.